Here's my original Symbiote Spidey, and here's the bootleg Symbiote Spidey with the packaging all messed up because, as I've shared on my bootleg Ben Reilly Spidey video, AliExpress sellers usually don't ship their figures in boxes, be it the figure is still in packaging or loose. So yeah, the clamshell on my bootleg Symbiote Spidey is crushed. I'm going to share with you 4 ways to spot the bootleg packaging. First one, and the most obvious, is that on the original, the hole to hang the packaging is off center and it's kind of touching the edge of the letter M. But for the bootleg, it is really at the center of the packaging. Second difference is that on the original packaging, the I, D, E and R aligns quite well on the inside and outside of the clamshell. But on the bootleg, they are really misaligned. Third, on the original, the warning piece of paper at the bottom has the English language facing outwards, but for the bootleg, it has the Arabic translation instead. And this is consistent with the bootleg Ben Reilly Spidey that I got. And for all these original figures, they have the English translation facing out. Even Rhino have that piece of paper with the English translation facing out. And here's the back of the packaging. The printing on the original packaging is actually sharper than the bootleg, but it's really difficult to see in pictures, and even in hand, the printing on the bootleg isn't that bad either. Only just very slightly less sharp. So if you don't have the original in hand to compare with, you really can't tell. But what is obvious is that for the bootleg packaging, you can see kind of a dotted texture under the light. This is consistent with the retro Spidey bootleg and the Ben Reilly bootleg as well. On the original, the purple is really clear, and under the light, you really can't see any dotted texture. Here they are side by side. You can see the original under the light is really just plain purple, but on the bootleg, you can see the dotted texture. Now let's check out the differences between these two figures. Here's my original Symbiote Spidey and the bootleg from AliExpress. I'm going to share with you 8 differences between them. The first and most important difference is that the ab crunch on the bootleg is really loose. Look at that. It can really wiggle. The mid-torso joint is also slightly loose, but the ab crunch is really so much worse. All the other joints are okay, just the ab crunch, not a problem for the original. Original definitely has really tight joints. Second difference is that the bottom part of the spider logo is kind of hidden on the bootleg. On the original, both the bottom end of the spider logo can be seen when the figure is in the vanilla pose. But for the bootleg, when it's in the vanilla pose, look at that. The bottom end of the spider logo is actually kind of hidden under this lower torso. So you can position it such that the bottom of the spider logo can be seen, but if I were to turn it sideways, the figure is actually leaning backwards a bit. And at the back, more of it is actually hidden. Third difference is that for the bootleg, the leg of the spider logo gets slightly cut off at the armpit area over here, but for the original, it really goes along the edge and isn't cut off at all. On the other side, it's even more obvious that a part of it is cut off on the bootleg. On the original, same thing, the spider legs really go along the edge of the armpit area and doesn't get cut off at all. The paintwork of the eyes on the bootleg is good, just like the original, but on the inner side, it is actually hollow right behind the face, just like the bootleg Ben Reilly Spidey. Again, just like the bootleg Ben Reilly Spidey, the gap at the crotch area of the bootleg Spidey between the thigh and the lower torso is wider compared to the original. But I guess it is less obvious than what we see on the bootleg Ben Reilly Spidey because over here the figure is in black. And the reason for the gap is that the drop down thigh joint doesn't really work on the bootleg version. On the original, you can see that each leg is able to drop down. It's really kind of slight movement, but you can feel the drop down joint if you have the figure. But for the bootleg, the drop down thigh joint doesn't really work. Instead, it lifts up the other leg. So, you can never push the thigh and close up the gap. Because what happens is that when you push one side, the other side goes lower. There, it goes lower. They are able to do the same amount of split, although for the bootleg, I kind of have to force the leg apart a bit, and I think this would work with the bootleg Ben Riley Spidey as well, forcing the leg apart. For the 3 pairs of hands, only the fists has a visible paintwork difference, whereby for the original, the white rectangle is closer to the knuckles, but for the bootleg, the white rectangle is closer to the hinge joint. Same goes for the other side. White rectangle closer to the knuckles for the original. For the bootleg, it is closer to the hinge joint. For the other 2 pairs of hands, there really isn't much difference for the white rectangle paintwork. The position is really almost the same. But one difference that is subtle but obvious enough to see are at the pegs. If you look carefully on the pegs, on the original, it is a bit rounded at this part over here, but on the bootleg, it has a sharper edge on this groove over here. I think the difference is subtle but obvious enough to see. So, the bootleg Symbiote Spidey is kind of a decent figure. Most of the differences I shared is really minimal, except for the very loose ab crunch, which I guess is kind of fixable if you know how to do it. The figure would really be a good body base if you want to make a custom figure, just like the bootleg Ben Riley Spidey, although I'm not really sure how we are going to fix the drop down thigh joint. But overall, definitely the original is way better. Thanks for watching. Do check out my other comparison and reviews of Marvel Legends figures at my channel.